are a rapidly growing percentage of the population because of their stunningly high birth rates. It is estimated that the average ultra-Orthodox woman has 7.8 babies. As many of you know, the Jewish areas of Jerusalem are increasingly dominated by the ultra-Orthodox. In fact, in the 2008 mayoral election in Jerusalem, an ultra-Orthodox candidate boasted, "In another 15 years, there will not be a secular mayor in any city in Israel." Of course, he was exaggerating, but his boast is indicative of the growing power of the ultra-Orthodox in Israel. One final piece of data. About 1/2 of Israeli school children in first grade this year are either Palestinian or ultra-Orthodox. Given the high birth rates of the ultra-Orthodox and the Palestinians, their percentage of the first graders, and ultimately the population at large, will grow steadily with time. But varying birth rates among Israel's different communities are not the only factor that is changing the makeup of Israeli society. There is another dynamic at play. Large numbers of Israelis have left the country to live abroad, and most of them are not expected to return home. Several recent estimates suggest that between 750,000 and 1 million Israelis reside in other countries, and most of them are secular. On top of that, public opinion surveys indicate that many Israelis would like to move to another country. This situation is likely to get worse over time because many secular Jews will not want to live in an apartheid state whose politics and daily life are increasingly shaped by the ultra-Orthodox. All of this is to say that Israel's secular Jewish identity, which has been so powerful from the start, is slowly eroding and promises to continue eroding over time as the ultra-Orthodox grow in number and influence. That important development will make it more difficult in the years ahead for secular American Jews, who make up the bulk of the Jewish community here in the United States, to identify closely with Israel and be willing to defend it when it becomes a full-blown apartheid state. Of course, that reluctance to back Israel will be further strengthened by the fact that American Jews are among the staunchest defenders of traditional liberal values. The bottom line is that Israel will not be able to maintain itself as an apartheid state over the long term, because it will not be able to depend on the American Jewish community to defend its loathsome policies towards the Palestinians. And without that protection, Israel is doomed, because public opinion in the West will turn decisively against Israel as it turns itself into a full-fledged apartheid state. Thus, I believe that Greater Israel will eventually become a democratic binational state, and the Palestinians will dominate its politics, because they will outnumber the Jews in the land between the Jordan and the Mediterranean. What is truly remarkable about this situation is that the Israel lobby is effectively helping Israel commit national suicide. Israel, after all, is turning itself into an apartheid state, which, as Ehud Olmert has pointed out, is not sustainable in the modern era. What makes this situation even more astonishing is that there is an alternative outcome which would be relatively easy to achieve and is clearly in Israel's best interest, the two-state solution. It is hard to understand why Israel and its American supporters are not working overtime to create a viable Palestinian state in the occupied territories, and why instead they are moving full steam ahead to build Greater Israel, which will be an apartheid state. It makes no sense from either a moral or strategic perspective. Indeed, it is an exceptionally foolish policy. What about the Palestinians? I believe that the two-state solution is the best outcome for them as well as the Israelis. However, the Palestinians have little say in whether there will be two states living side by side, because they are presently at the mercy of the Israelis, who are the lords of the land. This means that the Palestinians are going to end up living in Greater Israel, which will be an apartheid state. Again, one might even argue that they have already reached that point. Regardless, the Palestinians will obviously have a vested interest in moving away from apartheid and toward democracy as quickly and painlessly as possible. Of course, that will not be easy, but there are better and worse ways to achieve that end. Let me conclude with a few words of advice to the Palestinians about how they should go about turning Greater Israel into a democratic binational state. First, it is essential to recognize that the Palestinians and the Israelis are engaged in a war of ideas. To be more specific, this is a war about two competing visions of the Middle East: a Greater Israel that is an apartheid state, and one that is a democracy. There is no question that the Palestinians have the easier case to make, as it is impossible to sell apartheid in the modern world. Second, to win this war, the Palestinians will have to adopt the South African strategy, which is to say that they will have to get world opinion on their side and use it to put enormous pressure on Israel to abandon apartheid and adopt democracy. This task will not be easy, because the new Afrikaners will redouble their efforts to defend Israel's heinous policies. Fortunately, their ability to do this is likely to diminish over time. Third, the Palestinians' most formidable weapon in this war of ideas will be the Internet, which will make it easy for them to document what Israel is doing and to get their message out to the wider world. Fourth, the Palestinians will need to build a stable of articulate spokespersons who can connect with Western audiences and make a compelling case against apartheid. In other words, they will need more Mustafa Barghoutis. The Palestinians will also need allies, and not only from the Arab and Islamic world, but from countries in the West as well. Many of the Palestinians' best allies will surely be righteous Jews, who will play a key role in the fight against apartheid inside Israel, as they did in the case of South Africa. Fifth, it is essential that the Palestinians make clear that they do not intend to seek revenge against the Israeli Jews for their past crimes, but instead are deeply committed to creating a binational democracy in which Jews and Palestinians can live together peacefully. The Palestinians do not want to treat the Jews the way the Jews have treated them. Finally, the Palestinians should definitely not employ violence to defeat apartheid. They should resist mightily for sure, but their strategy should privilege nonviolent resistance. The appropriate model is Gandhi, not Mao. Violence is counterproductive because if it gets intense enough, the Israelis might think that they can expel large numbers of Palestinians from the West Bank and Gaza. The Palestinians must never underestimate the dangers of mass expulsion. Furthermore, a violent new intifada would undermine support for the Palestinian cause in the West, which is essential for winning the war of ideas, which is ultimately the battleground on which Palestine's future will be determined. In sum, there are great dangers ahead for the Palestinians, who will continue to suffer terribly at the hands of the Israelis for some years to come. But it does look like the Palestinians will eventually get their own state. mainly because Israel seems bent on self-destruction. Thank you.